The man stands at the edge of a vast grassland, the horizon stretching unbroken in every direction. There are no trails carved into the earth, no markers rising from the terrain, no written instructions to follow. The sun hangs overhead, offering no clear indication of east or west at this hour. He carries no compass, no chart, no instrument of any kind. Yet he begins walking with absolute certainty, his pace steady, his direction unwavering. Within 3 days, he will arrive at a water source 70 miles distant, a place he has never personally visited but knows exists through knowledge passed down across generations. This is not magic. This is not luck. This is the original human technology, older than fire making, older than language itself. This is the art of navigation without tools. For hundreds of thousands of years, human beings traversed the planet's most unforgiving landscapes, using nothing but their senses, their memories, and their profound understanding of the natural world. They crossed oceans without charts. They navigated deserts without compasses. They found their way through forests so dense that the sky itself disappeared. The methods they developed represent some of the most sophisticated cognitive achievements in human history, yet they remain largely invisible to the modern mind. We have outsourced our sense of direction to satellites and screens, forgetting that our ancestors carried within themselves navigation systems of extraordinary precision and elegance. To understand how people found their way before the invention of maps and compasses, we must first recognize that navigation is not primarily about tools. It is about perception. It is about attention. It is about building and maintaining a mental model of the world so detailed and so accurate that one can move through space with confidence even when the destination lies far beyond the visible horizon. This capacity is not supernatural. It is deeply, fundamentally human, and it begins with the landscape itself. Consider the challenge facing a hunter-gatherer band moving through unfamiliar territory. Every element of the environment contains potential information. The direction of prevailing winds has shaped the growth patterns of trees, bending them subtly but consistently toward the lee side. The morning sun has dried the eastern faces of rocks while leaving the western faces damp with dew. Animal trails converge toward water sources, their paths worn deeper as they approach. Birds move in predictable patterns tied to the time of day and the season. The texture of soil changes as one moves between drainage basins. The smell of vegetation shifts with altitude and moisture. None of these signals alone provides complete navigational information, but taken together, they create a rich tapestry of environmental data that the trained observer can read with remarkable accuracy. The Aboriginal peoples of Australia developed what may be the most sophisticated system of land-based navigation ever created. For more than 60,000 years, they moved across a continent of staggering environmental diversity, from tropical rainforests to arid deserts, from coastal wetlands to mountain ranges. They did so without writing, without wheeled vehicles, without any of the technologies that later civilizations would consider essential for travel. Instead, they developed the songlines, intricate narratives that encoded the landscape itself into memory. A songline is simultaneously a creation story, a map, a legal document, and a navigation system. Each songline describes a path across the land, marking features created by ancestral beings during the dreaming. By singing the appropriate verses in the correct sequence, a traveler could navigate across hundreds of miles of terrain, the lyrics serving as precise directions tied to specific landmarks. The rhythm of the song corresponded to the rhythm of walking, so that maintaining the proper tempo meant arriving at each feature exactly as the lyrics described it. This was navigation transformed into music, geography encoded in verse. But the songlines represent only one manifestation of a universal human capacity. Across the planet, different cultures developed their own systems for fixing the earth in memory and moving through it with precision. In the Arctic, the Inuit developed navigation methods adapted to one of the most challenging environments on Earth. Here, the landscape itself seems designed to disorient. Snow covers everything, erasing the visual distinctions that make navigation possible elsewhere. Blizzards can reduce visibility to nothing. The sun disappears entirely for months at a time. Magnetic compasses behave erratically near the poles. Yet the Inuit traveled vast distances across the frozen sea and the barren tundra with confidence that astonished European explorers. They read the snow. Wind-driven snow forms patterns called sastrugi, ridges and waves sculpted by prevailing winds. Because these winds blow consistently from particular directions, the sastrugi serve as reliable indicators of orientation. An experienced Inuit traveler could determine cardinal directions by touch alone, feeling the snow patterns through their boots or examining them in the beam of a lamp during the polar night. They studied the behavior of ice, recognizing that saltwater ice and freshwater ice crack and melt differently, that certain formations indicate dangerous thin areas, while others mark stable paths. They watched the movements of Arctic foxes and caribou, animals whose own navigation instincts provided secondary confirmation of direction. They noted the quality of light reflecting from open water in the distance, subtle atmospheric effects invisible to untrained eyes. Ocean navigation presents different challenges entirely. There are no fixed landmarks, no permanent features to mark one's progress. The surface is in constant motion. Weather can change direction and speed with little warning. Yet Polynesian navigators crossed thousands of miles of open Pacific, discovering and settling islands scattered across an area larger than all the continents combined. They did this in double-hulled canoes, without instruments, guided by a body of knowledge so refined that it constitutes a science in its own right. The Polynesian wayfinder's primary tool was the star compass, a mental construct that divided the horizon into points marked by the rising and setting positions of stars, the sun, and the moon. But the stars were only part of the system. The wayfinder also read the ocean itself. Swells generated by distant storms and prevailing trade winds created consistent patterns that could be felt through the hull of the canoe. When these swells encountered islands, they refracted and reflected, creating interference patterns that extended many miles from shore. A skilled navigator could detect an island long before it became visible, feeling its presence in the subtle changes of the ocean's rhythm beneath his vessel. They observed seabirds, noting that certain species flew to sea in the morning to fish and returned to land in the evening. By tracking the direction of their flight at dawn and dusk, a navigator could determine the bearing to the nearest island. They watched cloud formations, knowing that the moisture evaporating from a vegetated island created distinctive cumulus clouds visible from great distances. They noted the color of the undersides of clouds, which reflected the lagoons and reefs below, creating a kind of sky map of unseen islands. The phosphorescent glow of certain sea creatures indicated particular water conditions and helped maintain course during night sailing. This was not intuition. This was systematic knowledge, the product of countless generations of observation, testing, and refinement. Polynesian navigation schools trained students for years before they were entrusted with guiding voyages. The curriculum included not only the technical skills of reading stars and swells, but also the mental discipline required to maintain constant attention over weeks of open ocean sailing. A moment's lapse could mean drifting past an island target with no way to return against the wind. But what made all of these navigation systems possible was a capacity that modern neuroscience is only beginning to understand: the human ability to construct and maintain cognitive maps. These are not conscious, visualized images like the maps we draw on paper. They are deep mental representations of space, built up through experience and stored in specialized brain regions, particularly the hippocampus. We navigate by consulting these internal maps, updating them as we move, using them to plan routes to destinations we cannot see. The discovery of place cells in the 1970 seconds revolutionized our understanding of how this works. Researchers found that specific neurons in the hippocampus fire when an animal occupies a particular location in space. Different cells respond to different locations, creating a kind of neural map of the environment. Later discoveries revealed grid cells in the adjacent entorhinal cortex, neurons that fire in regular geometric patterns as an animal moves, providing an internal coordinate system. Head direction cells track orientation. Border cells respond to environmental boundaries. Together, these neural systems create an astonishingly sophisticated internal GPS, one that operates without any external technology. This cognitive mapping capacity is not unique to humans, but humans have developed it to an extraordinary degree. We can form mental maps of spaces we have never physically visited, constructing them from verbal descriptions or imagined journeys. We can rotate our cognitive maps, viewing them from different perspectives. We can integrate information from multiple sources, combining visual landmarks with remembered sounds, smells, and physical sensations into unified spatial representations. We can share our cognitive maps with others through language, passing navigational knowledge across generations without ever committing it to paper. The desert-dwelling San people of southern Africa demonstrate this capacity in its most refined form. The Kalahari Desert offers few prominent landmarks. Its sandy plains stretch vast and seemingly uniform. Yet the San navigate it with precision, moving between water sources that may be many days' walk apart. They do so by maintaining extraordinarily detailed mental maps that include not only spatial information but temporal information, where water will be available at different seasons, where game will congregate at different times of year, how the landscape itself changes with the rains and the droughts. Their cognitive maps are four-dimensional, tracking both space and time. They navigate by 1,000 small signs that an outsider would never notice. The pattern of animal tracks in sand tells them not only what species passed, but when and from what direction the creature was traveling. The condition of vegetation indicates recent rainfall or its absence. The behavior of insects and birds signals the presence of water or prey. They read the landscape the way a literate person reads text, extracting meaning from patterns that seem random to the uninitiated eye. Perhaps most remarkable is how this navigational knowledge was preserved and transmitted across generations. Without writing, human societies developed elaborate oral traditions that encoded geographical information in memorable forms. Epic poems and songs served as mnemonic devices, their rhythms and rhymes making vast quantities of spatial data easier to recall. Elders spent years teaching young people the landscapes they would need to navigate, walking the land together, naming every feature, explaining its significance, embedding the territory in memory through direct experience. The memory palaces of ancient Greek and Roman orators used similar principles. By associating items to be remembered with specific locations in a well-known building, they could store and retrieve enormous quantities of information. The same cognitive architecture that allows us to remember where we put our keys allows us to remember the locations of water sources across a continent. Navigation and memory are deeply intertwined, relying on the same neural substrates, exploiting the same cognitive capacities. Modern research has shown that this navigational expertise literally changes the brain. London taxi drivers, who must memorize the city's labyrinthine street layout, show measurable enlargement of the posterior hippocampus compared to other people. The brain regions responsible for spatial cognition grow stronger with use, like muscles responding to exercise. Indigenous navigators who grew up learning traditional wayfinding techniques likely possess neural architectures we can scarcely imagine, their hippocampi shaped by lifetimes of intense spatial processing. Yet this capacity is not lost to modern humans. It lies dormant, awaiting activation. Studies have shown that people who regularly navigate without technological assistance maintain sharper spatial cognition as they age. Those who rely exclusively on GPS gradually lose the ability to form coherent cognitive maps, their hippocampi actually shrinking with disuse. We are trading an ancient capacity for a modern convenience, and the cognitive costs of that exchange are only beginning to become clear. The history of human navigation without tools is ultimately a story about attention, about the focused, systematic observation of the natural world, about the patient accumulation of environmental knowledge across lifetimes and generations, about the remarkable plasticity of the human brain and its capacity to develop specialized skills in response to survival pressures. Our ancestors were not navigating blind. They were navigating with eyes more open than our own, attending to information we have learned to ignore, reading patterns we no longer see. When we look at a forest, we see green confusion. They saw trails written in broken twigs, messages encoded in disturbed leaves, directions indicated by the growth patterns of moss. When we look at the ocean, we see featureless blue. They saw a textured landscape of swells and currents, a sky map of clouds and birds, a living guide to islands beyond the horizon. They had not conquered nature. They had joined it, becoming part of its rhythms, attuned to its signals, able to move through it with the confidence of creatures who truly belong. This knowledge is not entirely gone. Traditional navigators still practice their arts in remote regions of the world. Scientists work to document techniques before they disappear. A growing movement seeks to revive wayfinding skills among people eager to reconnect with capacities that defined our species for millennia. The tools may be forgotten, but the capacity remains, written into the architecture of our brains, waiting to be remembered. The man crossing the grassland carries no compass because he needs none. The landscape speaks to him in a language his ancestors taught him to understand. The direction of the wind, the movement of distant birds, the angle of shadows, the texture of soil beneath his feet, all of these are words in a vocabulary older than human speech. He navigates by reading the world itself, translating its patterns into direction and distance, holding in his mind a map no satellite could replicate. This is the original human technology, and somewhere within each of us, it waits still.